Metzger. Metzger was one of my signature wrestling moves. I was known for it. If I went to camps and or clinics, they would always have me show the group the Metzger. It's an excellent wrestling technique. It was a very safe technique. And there was only two options. You were going to score or you were not going to score. Now, while you might think that's every move, no, it's not. I mean, in baseball alone, you're going to hit the ball, well, you might strike out, right? There are other options. In wrestling and fighting, you might go for something. And if it works, you're a hero. And if it doesn't, you're now in a terrible position. That wasn't the case with the Metzger. You either scored your points or you didn't get, you're right back like it never happened. Okay. There is something known as the Iowa. Now, Iowa is an institution, of course, University of Iowa. This came around in the Dan Gable, Jim Zaleski days, and it is a well-known wrestling position. There is something known as the Navy ride. And Navy, which is contested in the Division I level, back before my time, this was like in the 70s, but they had a position and they were the ones doing it, and it's to this day known as a Navy ride. There is a front headlock. It is the most devastating front headlock I have learned. I used to be trained by Mark Schultz, and this one is the most devastating I've learned, and we call it a Colot. It is what Kerry Colot did. I don't know if Kerry Colot has ever shown it, by the way. But is what Kerry Colot would use in a front headlock position. And we must call it a Colot. I coach at a high school. When I'm not coaching at the high school, I'm coaching with the kids. I don't coach above that level. I'm not in the college rooms or working with the senior guys. And the Colot is a choke. Make no mistake. You can ask Oscar Wood. It is a choke, which happens to be frowned upon in wrestling. But it's done from a legal position, which has a head and arm. And the reason I'm taking the time to tell you this is you can't yell out, choke him. Imagine that. Imagine Chael's in the corner of a 9-year-old. I'm yelling, choke him. So you, Colot. Yell, Colot. And these are just a few off the top of my head. You've watched boxing before. Hey, think Mike Tyson, right? And that means a couple of things. That means your head is going side to side, first and foremost, as opposed to a pull. As opposed to in-out, as opposed to a duck. Specifically, when you hear people talk about Mike, this is what they are talking about. And you've heard that. Okay. Now, I'm setting the stage, and I have been very candid with you guys to let you know that Tim Welsh and I are teammates. I never had a big fight, ever, where I didn't train with him. So, is that a biasness? I mean, sure it is. But I also comes from an understanding. It comes with a relation. I just spoke to Tim Welsh. And tone is very important. I think that you guys would agree with that. If you go back and you hear the tape, you'll hear it very clearly. I'm doing my best to kind of act it out right now. Of course, Tim's a little louder. They're in a big arena. But when he said, pressure Merab, you're going to have to go, Merab. When Tim said that, he said in a very similar tone to this. He was just speaking, raised his voice a little bit. Wasn't yelling, wasn't being demeaning. There was by no means profanity. And would you like to know why there were none of those things? Would you like to know why that was the tone? Would you like to know it was right at the beginning of the match? I mean, all hell hadn't even broke loose. Nobody's chips her down. Nobody's frustrated. The champion of the world's coach is speaking to him. And do you want to know why it was so calm? Because he wasn't talking to Merab. He wasn't telling Merab what to do. And that has been a misunderstanding of this entire thing. Much like there are techniques known as the Metzger. Oh, I didn't take the time to tell you. Metzger, my big move, is named after a guy named Andre Metzger. That was his name. It's a tremendous compliment, right? We don't even call the low single John Smith, who innovated the thing. We call it the low single. Like, there's not very many moves that are named after a guy. The same with the Mike Tyson. We don't have a Tommy Hearns position, something that's known like that. And my point to you is, Coach Tim Welsh wasn't talking to Merab. When he said you got to go Merab, he was giving a message to Sean. He was talking to Sean. And there was the same misunderstanding that, in my opinion, Tim just let ride. To be fair with you, I actually didn't talk to him about this, but I'm quite sure that I'm right. And that was with Aljo. Tim Welsh yelled some things to Aljo. Now, everybody knows that because he said Aljo. So he must be talking to Aljo. And right after he said that, Aljo did what he was instructed to do and got caught and put down and lost his title, is the way the story went. And I believe Tim just let that go. Like, it was headlines, it was whatever, not to mention he was the coach. He has never tries to get in front of his athlete, right? Never tries to get the focus or take the focus. But I want to take the moment just to share with you, you're not understanding. And he wasn't yelling for Merab to do anything. He was yelling an instruction to Sean. And within their instructional, they had a move which was more positionally of how they're going to control distance, and it had Merab's name. Now, what do you want to do with that? Would that be considered excessive coaching? And I want to give Herb, right? Herb taught us all something. I didn't know there was a rule called excessive coaching. And I'm only sharing that. What a wild misinterpretation. The world of wrestling, when we yell out Colot, boy, that's meant as a respect. When I would do a Metzger, my coach, Chuck Kerney, who went to Oklahoma State, Metzger went to Oklahoma. Chuck Kerney won't call it a Metzger. He calls it a hip lift. But he calls it a hip lift because of the rivalry between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. So, but I stick with Metzger. I learned it from Andre Metzger. It's known as a Metzger. When it was taught to me by Broderick Lee, he called it a Metzger. I mean, it's just one of these things where you've got names, and they're meant to be respectful. And if you listen to how Tim said it, it was the same way as he gave all his other instruction, and there was no profanity on it. He wasn't attempting to hide it, which is the reason that he said it out loud. And I just think it matters, right? I just think it matters. You have somebody in MMA, and a coach like Tim Walsh, who had, and I don't think he ever lost it. I don't think he ever lost it, an active fighter's contract with the UFC. I don't think he ever lost it. I think he just, because again, he put everything into his athlete. You have somebody that sacrifices. You have somebody that works very hard. You have somebody that's having dinners by themselves in a hotel room. Like, it's not the great life that you see just because they pop on TV a couple of times a year. And to have it suggested that he was using poor sportsmanship, I'm just attempting to tell you another side. Like, there are many times I never wrestled Andre Metzger. If I had, my coaches might have been yelling, Metzger, step inside, Metzger, step inside, Metzger, which would be Chael, step inside this opponent who happens to be named Metzger, and hit with the hip lift. I just thought you guys would want to know that. I think it's important that you know that. Do what you want with it. Roast me for definitive. But I want you to have accurate information, and now you do.